Hi, folks. Welcome to the SIG meeting for Europe and the Americas. It is the 16th of September, 2025. And in this call, we're going to go through a brief update on the LTS and where that is at the moment, and some apologies from me on a lack of progress on some of those items. And then we are going to open the floor to questions on LTS and any other business. So I'll give you a quick update on the LTS. So LTS, long-term support for embedded, and really that's about creating an environment where we have a compiler, tool chain, WASI-libc, and a runtime environment that are all in lockstep with each other. And it's dealing with some of the confusion that's not WASI related necessarily, but is coming from core WebAssembly in the feature releases and making sure that everything that's built works. And the verification and validation required to ensure that that happens and we keep everything in sync. That's what we're working on for the LTS. There's a document that outlines it. It's on Google and it was written a while ago. I had a task in our last meeting 2 weeks ago, which was between USA and Asia, and that was to go through and break that down into actionable items, start bringing out tasks we need to do to create LTS and make it a functional reality. I unfortunately got sidetracked with some internal company business and haven't had the chance to do that. So I do apologize to everybody on the call for that lack of progress on this item. So with that, I didn't see any agenda items that have been suggested. So I can open the floor to questions on LTS or on anything else. And I know we've got Pete on the call who's dropped in after a period of absence. So I'm happy to give an update on that LTS or answer any questions. I wrote a chunk of it, as did Stephen. So I think we're on the right people to answer some of the questions on that, if you have any. So
Sure, yeah, and yeah, given this is recorded, I'll I'll word things in a way that I'm okay them being recorded and put up on YouTube. But yeah, the long story short, so as I mentioned to Chris at the start of the meeting before this was the recording was started, I sort of fell off the face of the planet for like 6 months or 4 months, I don't know, quite a while. The TLDR is just that Woven. I won't speak in for Woven as like a representative of Woven, but just like I had reached out to Chris and kind of others in the bytecode, that are working the bytecode alliance a while back about, hey, kind of like teach me what's going on, like make me a little less ignorant about what's going on regarding WebAssembly and the bytecode alliance, and then this SIG and the LTS. And yeah, again, explicitly not speaking on behalf of Woven by Toyota as a representative, but the idea, I think, is just that given that things are a little bit in flux in a sense, like it looks like there's maybe a group that's sort of chasing the standard, and there's like folks that are kind of like staying up to date with the standard, and there's like kind of that part of maybe the Bytecode Alliance community that's doing this, and then there's like this LTS effort for embedded. I think that, yeah, okay, I'll speak for myself. I got a little bit confused, and it was a little bit like, okay, maybe let's kind of take a step back and like see how things are going to be developing. I think the verbatim I was given is like, if you're picking on, if you're, what is it, betting on a horse, every horse needs a stable. And so so this was kind of the feedback I was given, which is just that like there were some things that I was thinking about doing, like within the Bytecode Alliance as a representative of Woven by Toyota, and like gonna kind of pause on some of those things and maybe just like be more of an observer for a little while, and just kind of like see what's going on. So to that note, yeah, if there are things related to the LTS, and I don't know, maybe you could give me a download on that about how that's been shaping up lately.
yeah.
Again, I'm pretty ignorant, so pretty much anything you say, you'll see me go ooh and ah. So
uh, okay, I think from the LTS side, um, what what became apparent is that the release process that comes from core WebAssembly works really well for the browser environment where they have these feature releases. The issue that we've seen downstream that's impacted some of the ESIG members is we take a period in time, and we say this runtime is what we need to deploy, and it gets burnt into a ROM image and shipped. And now we're fixed on this ROM image with this subset of features. And then new features come along, as they do, which is good because it's healthy. It shows WebAssembly is progressing, so we have new features being added. And at some point, one of those new features is turned on by default in the compiler and the compiler toolchain. And what happens then is that the latest version of WASI makes use of it, and it gets built with that features turned on. Then the WASI gets built with it turned on, the compiler's built with it turned on, and suddenly the code that you compile no longer runs. And even if you work out what your compiler switches are to turn it off and what you compile, it's linked against a libc that contains the new features. So you end up in this world where you need to have all three of those things kind of in sync. And everybody's doing the same thing to try and make sure they're in sync. So why don't we just share the cost and do it? So that was a huge chunk of what the LTS was looking at doing, is saying, look, all these things need to be in sync. That would be really good. We don't have right now a binary release of all of those components that's set to exactly the same setting that we can control, because those entities are not aligned and tracked, and that's what the LTS would do. So that's the guts of the LTS. The other thing is, okay, now we've got that far. The other thing we should look at is how do we make it cheaper and easier to bring software to WebAssembly and execute in that environment. And because we're in the embedded SIG, we look at it and we go, well, hey, it's really all down to, we don't have the component model. We're on WAMA for the most part, so we don't have the component model. The component model, we're giving the feedback to Luke, and we'll get there. We'll use it whenever it's ready. But in the meantime, we need something that we can use today. So that's going to be Preview 1 based normal WebAssembly function calls as they're implemented today. And we kind of need that. And we need to expand that API to cope with porting in software that we've got, we want to bring to that platform. So at some point, whatever we add, we're going to need to migrate to component model preview 2, preview 3, whenever it's stable and ready to go, and we can show that it hits our non-functional requirements. That's a separate conversation, but whenever we get there, we can move it over. And a really good thing about that is we know that Luke and the folks working on it have produced a whole bunch of tooling that they use internally to migrate Preview 1 binaries to the latest version of stuff. So that's fantastic, and it should mean we could get a seamless solution for that bit when we're ready. But in the meantime, we're going to look at, well, we've got to add some new features, and then in the LTS document, we said, well, how do you go about adding those features? And one of the things we're really keen to do is not spend a lot of time defining an API for stuff if an API already exists. So just take something that works. I think I was reading a blog post recently about why Linux was so successful, and the point it made was that, well, Linus Torvalds, when he created the kernel, didn't need to create the user space API because it had really been defined by Richard Stallman, and it was just, not what should it be and then implement it. It was, this is what it is, implement this, and how do you implement that in the most efficient way, which is a different story. So with that learning in mind, and the LTS document makes a reference to Wiley saying, well, hey, using this Linux thing, they've done it with, like, here's the Linux API and Syscore API. You could do something like that. That's not to say that we would adopt it, but that it points to the learning being true. Just use what's there and don't reinvent the wheel. So that's what we did. The other thing we say is, pragmatic portability. Some guiding principles. If you are going to implement system interfaces, not all devices have all system interfaces. Just the same way as if you're on a edge environment and you write some software that works on a camera and you've got a temperature sensor, well, you can't run the camera software on a temperature sensor. And you wouldn't run the temperature sensor on the software on the camera either, because they just don't have the peripherals you need to talk to. So pragmatic portability. It's okay to say that not everything has to run everywhere. And it's okay to have a description of what those APIs are that you've got available. And that's something else that comes into the LTS. It's like, hey, as we go down this path and we add some new features, we're going to need to keep a track on like, hey, this device supports this and not that, and we need to think about it. That's essentially it. So that's the guts of the LTS, really. It goes through some of the practicalities in the document of like, hey, how would we do we need to create our own coding standards? How do we set this all up? And we're like, actually, for the most part, everything we want to do is a downstream of what's already there. And it's just saying, we put the validation and verification in to say, this compiler, this feature set, this WASI libc, this runtime, validate, all works on all of these platforms. That's it. And that bit was the bit I was meant to break down into tasks and like, hey, this is what we need to do. And then that would give us an opportunity to request support if there's any available from the Bytecode Alliance. Hey, we would like to set up this, essentially it's a verification CI/CD toolchain for it. There's some hashed pinned versions of GitHub releases, so we can say it's like it's this version and that version and this version, and we've shown it all works together. Just get it from this location and it will just work. That's essentially it for the most part for the initial bit. And then at some point after that, we can look at, hey, we need to add its features. What would that look like? But the LTS is basically, let's get the groundwork going first. So in that way, I don't think, I think there was some, it took us a while to work out what we really needed to do. And it also, I think there was some confusion about like, hey, is this going to be something that isn't, that you know, throws away the whole concept of the component model and stuff. It's like, yeah, no, we just can't use it right now. So let's just be pragmatic. It's more of a pragmatic thing. Is it a standard? No, it's a project to do that. So that's it.
Cool. Yeah. While you were describing, I mean, if others have something to add, that's cool. I had some kind of questions pop into my mind as you were explaining it. So if it's cool, I'll just ask those. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you'd mentioned about, okay, like an API already exists for things, and you mentioned about Wally, and then there's also like WASI. I'm curious on, so my current understanding is that WASI is like the chosen, or a chosen, maybe is the right way to say it, standard for how to do interactions with system level things within the Bytecode Alliance. I know that there's like a multi-stage process for things to actually sort of make it, maybe like 5 stages or something, and it's not like there yet. Is Wally another, like I've heard of Wally, I know like vaguely, right? Like it's like POSIX maybe stuff, like APIs that are there and like trying to make that somewhat portable. Is Wally, and again, I'm not in a loop. Is Wally an intended thing to bring to the Bytecode Alliance as a standard to kind of like flesh out and develop there? Or maybe it already has been?
We haven't talked about that, to be honest. So it hasn't come up in conversation. As a inspiration and the direction of travel, it looks interesting. But would we adopt it wholesale? To be honest, within the Bytecode Alliance, that hasn't come up in conversation. It's a different way of looking at it. I mean, so when you peel back the hood on what Wally is, Wally at the moment is it's a modified WAMA runtime, and in it they've exposed the Linux syscall interfaces, and then they modified Muscle so you can compile C code for it. I know they're working on some Rust adapters here, so you can compile Rust for it. But the whole libc, it's not POSIX, it's just the syscall interface. And they go, hey, Linus made that not a standard, but he keeps it pretty locked in stone. And even if there's a bug in it, you preserve the behavior in the bug and all the rest of it. So it doesn't provide platform portability, and it doesn't provide any security concepts. So that's bits that you get from Preview 1 that don't exist in Wally. But as an academic exercise, like, hey, it provides a really cheap way of porting software. Yeah, it does. Now, there's a long way to go before we could use that in production at the moment. Doesn't mean we're adopting it. We haven't even talked about that with the Bytecode Alliance. But I think as a academic exercise, hey, this is an interesting way to travel. Yeah, it's worthwhile learning from folks who have done the experimentation. But the LTS document just says, hey, we can learn from them, but it doesn't give us the direction of travel. That would be an interesting conversation to have, but it's not what the LTS is focused on right now. It's more like, let's just be practical and get something we can all rely on that works. So, and then we have a managed release process for it. So when something new comes out, or a new feature comes along, we're not caught off guard, which has happened to some of our eSig colleagues who've suddenly found their CI/CD pipelines broken because a new feature goes from being a default to opt-in to a default to opt-out, and the compiler flags change, and it just gets turned on, and then it doesn't work on the runtime. Fun stuff that comes from keeping everything in sync. So we're like, let's create the stability first, and then look at extending it next. So that's essentially it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, this was like one of the things that I think was of interest was, there WASI is like, again, I'm not familiar with how the Bytecode Alliance process works and all these things, or the W3C process works. But my understanding is like WASI is a possible standard. It's like not worked its way all the way through. And I think that, again, not speaking for my employer, but I think that, if there were, say, like a thought around an alternative way to interact with system level resources, if that were like also considered a first class citizen, like obviously you're sort of learning to walk right now before you run 100%, get that. But if that were like also standardized in a way and like well understood, I think that would be like an awesome direction to head when you've had those initial first few steps with the LTS and have things a little bit more stable. So
yeah, I think I don't know if the problem I think a lot of us face is that Preview 1 doesn't provide the complete breadth of functionality that we need. And Preview 2 and 3 are not in a state that we can use at the moment. And although they introduced the modular concepts, they don't have all the stuff that we need. And there's some stuff that might even require a core WebAssembly contribution. So things like signal handling and to do that properly. Like, so we get to the point where it's like, yeah, let's provide the stability, but there's a way to go in addressing that. And how we go about addressing that, there's learnings from Wally, of course. There's also learnings from the core WebAssembly group and how they're working, and we've got to talk to them about what they're doing from the W3C process point of view. And Luke is very well versed in this. So there's a phase release process that the W3C uses, and then there is a replication of that phased process inside WASI. Well, I think WASI as a whole is at phase 2, is it, or phase 3, Luke? Oh, I see a hand raised as well. Luke, over to you, and then I'll give the floor to Ron.
Yeah, I think you're right, phase 2.
Okay. Great. And then Ron.
Hello. Thank you very much. Sorry I missed the first few minutes of this meeting, as well as a couple of other meetings, summer vacation. But the question I wanted to ask was, when we talked about the actual host runtime, I think that's kind of the elephant in the room of previous conversations is for there to be LTS API, there has to be an implementation that can be used. The default has been Whammer, but that I don't think there's an agreement of who is going to actually implement things that maybe are needed inside of Whammer. It's just sort of, by the good graces of Intel and Microsoft and some other people, as far as I understand. So, Pete, as a guy who's done a lot of embedded stuff, as you are, I've followed a bit with um, Ferrocene and some of the other things. Although I'm a Go guy myself, I do a bit of Rust. I've written more than a few thousand lines of Rust, so, but I don't really know Rust, I suppose. But I do, but I don't. Anyway, the point being, you're an embedded guy, so I think you understand the criticality of actually having a runtime that runs on the target embedded platform, which I think discussions of this API have to sort of include that. Anyway, I just wanted to see if that was something had been brought up. I'm going to go back on mute.
No, Ron, it's fine. Pete.
Sure. Yeah. So I will continue to give this disclaimer. I'm not speaking on behalf of my employer, Woven by Toyota. But we a number of months back, we did sort of take a little bit of a survey out of what are the current runtimes that are available. And I mean, long story short is that for some activities that we had planned, the idea would have been to begin with Whammer due to its portability aspects to different architectures, but then try to move to another runtime, maybe like Wasm time, maybe others that are written in a memory safe language, which could provide us some of the things that we like. Woven sort of as a company is like, how do we modernize and bring forward like the best possible safety security practices and keep quality level high for all of Toyota customers, right? So that was a concern, I'll say, or like a thing that we had in our mind as we were evaluating, and it basically would have kind of boiled down to like Whammer due to portability, and then kind of moving to another runtime which is written in a memory safe language like Rust. By the way, I have to drop in 3 minutes for another meeting, so I just wanted to give a disclaimer right now that I may disappear suddenly if we're in the middle of talking about something. I don't know if that answered your question, Ron.
It brought up more questions, but Stephen, I think, has something to add on this.
Yeah. What I would say too is anything, and this was something we discussed at the beginning of the LTS effort is, hey, if people want to take advantage of that, we need implementations. Specs aren't going to run the code, right? And so those of us involved in the ESIG or in the LTS process need to pony up resources for the things we want, right? So runtimes aside, if something gets added, a bug needs to get fixed, we need to add some functionality to WASI libc, whatever that work may be, we need folks from this group or the wider community to contribute, right? And so I think all of us here are trying to make sure that we can provide some resources from our organizations to move things along and do that. And I think that's part of what Chris is hoping to line up. I don't think it's so much of we don't have resources. I think it's a matter of where do we direct those resources? And so that's something I think Chris is trying to put together with the task list and how do we get started and move forward.
Yeah, so Ron, I was apologizing at the start of the meeting for I had an outstanding task from last time to take the LTS document and break it into actionable items. I haven't had a chance to do that, but that part of it is to try and see who will be able to contribute to achieving those goals. So it's turning the words into actions, and also coincided with the internal end of financial year. So complete chaos. the office and not being able to get it done. But for that, I do apologize again. So, but it's coming. Yeah, and you're right to raise the concern that we have done some talking but no action, so we need to move along. So, yeah. So that kind of, I think, is there any other questions there we want to go through? Floor's open. We can use.
Yeah, I think I had one more, but I think it'll take a little bit more time to address. It was around just kind of migration tools from, like, say, one version of the standard to another. I have to literally drop right now, so I'll try to attend the next the next instance of this one. And my 11:30 meeting is recurring, so I will be I think I'll be a perpetual half-hour joiner. But yeah, maybe could chat a little bit more with y'all about that next time. So yeah, thanks very much for having me.
That'd be great, Pete. No problem. Take care.
All right. Yep.
Come
Take
back
care, everybody.
soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
So then the floor remains open because, I don't have an agenda for this call, and I had the apology for not doing the task breakdown, which we would have gone through had I done it. So,
I have two things. One quick one, kind of a discussion point, if that's okay.
yep.
So first, public service announcement. There's a WASI SDK 26 and now 27 that came out a few weeks ago. They upped the major compiler version of Clang to 20 from, I believe, 19 in some point release. And then 27, I believe, has enabled Lime 1 as the new set of defaults. Just know that the defaults that were in the latest release of Whammer do not align with the libc defaults. And so you get a weird instruction not understood issue. So if you're seeing that, either roll back to 25 or enable the, there's one option in Whammer to support the Lime 1 stuff. If you search search Lime 1 in Whammer, you'll see the compile option.
Okay. Great.
I hit that this weekend, and actually a bunch of my folks hit it as well because they upgraded to SDK 27. So
Yeah.
So that's public service announcement. Other question, the whole component model, something we've discussed before and something I had discussions with some folks when I was at the Open Source Summit in Amsterdam, was around supporting the component model on core runtimes. That's something that Jayco does today. And it's something that we've discussed and put Luke a little bit on the spot here because he and I have actually discussed this as well. I think that's something that we want to, it's going to take a while, and it's something we want to track, right? The ability to basically support these on runtimes that don't natively understand the component model yet. Whether that we keep this in place permanently or this is just during the transition period, regardless of that, we need to kind of figure out what it takes to go do that. So the question I would have is, where do we find out how that works today and what we would need to put in place to make a runtime such as Whammer or WAS0 or WASM Edge support the component model through the quote-unquote Jayco approach? Is there somebody we should talk to as well? Potentially Luke, that's a better resource for this than you?
Yeah. So incidentally, I was talking to Alex Triton, one of the core maintainers of WASM Time, about this. He thought the idea was, a great idea. Also being able to maybe actually factor out kind of some of the commonality of how WASM Time itself implements the component models. So as we're talking about factoring out a common piece of logic that's kind of already done internally by WASM Time, the way Jayco works is it just kind of rips out this just chunk of WASM Time and it compiles it to WASM. And then it runs the WASM in JS to do, so it's very inceptive. But it kind of does it in a way which is like, it works, but you could imagine maybe the code being refactored to be a little more, made and designed for widespread reuse and factored nicely. So there's already, if you kind of look how Jayco works, that's how it works. And there's a company, ArcJet, that did that for Go based on the Jayco approach, and that's called Gravity. So there's already somebody who kind of looked at Jayco and said, let's do that for Go. So it could run on WAS0. So there's probably a project to like say, okay, if we want to work on this, like how do we kind of better factor it so it's not so kind of magical and it's a little more like designed for this purpose. So there's just like maybe just a standalone tool or create that, as a, component in, core WASM out, core WASM plus metadata file out. So that I guess as soon as somebody wanted to work on that, I assume, Alex would be happy to talk to that person and then talk about what the different refactoring steps could be to migrate from what we have now to something more widely reusable. But anyways, it does seem like a great idea. And even in the long term, like, it could end up being a permanent part of the ecosystem. Oh, one side note, though, I have noticed just from bugs filed and questions asked that WASM Edge does seem to be just implementing component model and the guts of it directly in their C++ runtime. So my guess is they would not use this.
I did see that. I don't think it's complete, and I don't know where they are. So yeah, but they are. I did see that they're on that trajectory. So that's good.
Yeah, not complete, but they're doing some of the parts, the harder parts that this approach, the Jaco approach, right, would factor out. They're actually, they're doing it themselves. So that was just recent progress, because they had some early progress like last year, and then it stalled, and then I guess it resumed more recently in the last couple months.
Good. Okay, so in our copious free time, we'll have to spin up I think it sounds the best thing to do is spin up a work stream around this, get Alex and probably yourself involved, and then figure out how to go do that. So I didn't know it actually compiled parts of WASM time, and that's kind of interesting, very meta.
Yeah. And I don't think that part's necessary. That's if you just want to run it in Node.js, which is where Jaco runs in Node. So that's why I did that.
Thanks for the reminder about gravity. Obviously I've seen it before because I had it starred, but I completely forgot about it until you mentioned it. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, great. Yeah, happy to point people to it.
Yeah, and does that I mean, I have it started as well, but I've actually never used it. Does that use the Jaco bits as is, or did they have to make any changes to that? Do you know, Luke?
My guess is they plucked out just the core module, because that's the part that doesn't know about JS. The part that was, taken from WASM time compiled to WASM. I expect they plucked out that part, and then did what Jaco did for JS, likewise for Go. But that would be speculation on my part.
Cool. Thanks, Luke.
Yeah, glad you're asking about this. I think this would be a great work stream.
Okie dokie. Any other questions? Going once. Going twice. And I guess we're done. Oh, we've got one. Frederick.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right. So I got sent the LTS brainstorm document from Michiel, and I saw in there that a couple of projects are like, how is it formed? There will be a downstream fork of the following projects, and I saw that both Rust, as in the Rust compiler, and Wammer are selected, and I was wondering, does that imply that the Rust Wammer bindings project will also be included, or is it the intent? I don't know, like, what's the intent with the Rust support?
The intent with Rust support, so we have one eSig partner, it's Amazon, that's a heavy Rust user. So when we said, hey, we're gonna, we know we've got this multiple version problem that comes from the phased releases from core WebAssembly, and we need to mitigate that. Amazon said, oh, that's cool, but it only works for us if we also include the Rust toolchain. So when you build with Rust, you would get something with the appropriate features turned on. So that would be the goal. I'm not the Rust expert though, so I would happily turn it over to those people that are. And if we can't answer it in this call, allow the comments to the LTS brainstorming document so that we do answer it.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I already added a comment, but I thought, like, I saw all the other comments were from before the holiday break.
Yeah.
So I thought I'll drop by here and ask it here also.
Good. It's good. I think the summer break was real, and the delays happened consequently. Yeah. Thank you very much for bringing it up. Let's make sure we answer that one. I'll take that as an action to do along with this initial task breakdown. Cool. Any other questions? Going once, going twice. And on the East Coast, it's 20 minutes to 12 o'clock and time for a lunch break, perhaps. So thank you very much, everybody, for your time today. I will stop the recording and look to upload it later on today.
Thanks, everyone. Much appreciated.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, all.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.